Welcome to Commander Central, episode 216, and today we're going to look at the top 10 underappreciated cards from Magic's first 10 expansions. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Gentlemen, how's it going today?
Wonderful.
Everyone's feeling energized and COVID-free, hopefully?
Yeah.
So far, so good.
I risked it the other day. My buddy's wife's been in and out of the hospital and all that, and she's actually a nurse at Mayo, and I finally got to see her. And I'm like, you know what? Screw it. If I catch COVID, I'm like, I need to give you a hug. So I went and gave her a hug. So now I'm on that cusp where I'm like, I hope I don't catch it now.
Well, they've started prepping at my wife's school, getting ready to go back to classes. So, and one of the things they did is they brought in extra teachers this year so they can reduce class sizes and basically split the classes in half for the most part.
Yep.
So she's been getting ready for that, like putting up dividers in her room, doing that kind of thing. And they had a few staff meetings and everyone, sat there, 6 or 8 feet apart and had masks on. But one of her teachers came home, I think it was, or one of her coworkers came home, I think it was on Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, I guess. We're recording this. Must have been Tuesday. And her daughter had gotten sick during the day that day, who's 18 or something, I think a freshman in college, went in to get checked and has COVID-19.
Oh.
So now my wife is doing the math. Okay, the odds that her coworker had it that day are very slim. I mean, my wife wasn't near her, but by the time then she found that out, she had came home and I had kissed her hello and we had made dinner and my son sat and ate dinner with us. So now him and I are both okay. Again, the odds are super, super small that we picked it up from her or that she even had it in the first place to get it from her coworker who may not have had it, but you don't know, right? So is it okay for me to now? I don't know. It's just a absolute mess of trying to figure out what's safe and what's not.
Honestly, the best way I can look at this is we're all going to get it. So it's going to happen.
This certainly makes it feel that way for sure.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be the person responsible for giving it to somebody else either. That would feel terrible. So
I agree with you there.
I don't even know. And all the prep for school stuff too, everyone going back to school, this is already something at her school prior to students showing up. And they're already dealing with it. How is it going to be once there's, 20 kids in a classroom?
So personal question for you, Dana.
Shoot.
Do you know if your school that Declan goes to, if they've given out the school supply list yet? Because I have not received mine.
I don't think they have, but I tend to not pay attention.
Your wife works there, so
my wife works there, right? So I get to kind of be a slacker because I don't have to pay attention because she'll just bring home the list, and so I as a parent I can be a little bit detached from that because it just happens. Kind of I don't need to pay attention to when parent-teacher conferences are because she has to go to them anyway, so she just tells me.
Oh.
So yeah, I get to cut corners, but I don't think so. I have not seen anything yet.
I figured I'd ask, so that's just how things are.
I feel like some schools are a little bit kind of the mindset that they might not be going back, so I don't know. I don't know.
Couldn't tell.
Anyway, that's enough non-EDH conversation. I know everyone out there deals with this stuff enough on their own at home. They want to have a little break.
It's good for them to realize that even we deal with it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, for sure. Everybody is going through the exact same struggles.
Yep, and we feel all of you out there who are struggling.
For sure. Yeah, this has been... Well, I was just thinking about... This is, I guess, Magic related, but I was just thinking today about Double Masters, and I went to maybe do a couple pre-orders, and I want to ask you guys what you're looking for there. But first, I'll mention this. I was then okay, I want to pick up a foil version of whatever card it was, but it's way less cool having a foil when you're only playing Magic on webcam. I'm like, man...
How hard are those to read when they're foil, though, too? Because they're hard to read in the shop.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I'm like, then I was thinking that makes it way less fun to bling out a deck when you're playing over a blurry webcam. But So speaking of Double Masters, what I wanted to ask you guys, because full spoiler lists are out now and we know everything that's available, and I think cards actually come out, I believe this Friday, I think is when release is, so the show will air on Monday a couple of days after that. Is there anything you guys are looking for just in terms of stocking up on because the price has dropped, or things you're looking to upgrade a premium version, anything along those lines?
Probably Mana Crypt, because it's getting reprinted again.
You took mine, Chris. I just want 8 Mana Crypts.
Yeah, I mean, with it being reprinted, I hope it drops the price from the $200 mark down. But other than that, I definitely want the Tron lands. Oh, they're so pretty.
Those Tron lands look really good. Actually, I like the Mana Crypt art as well. That kind of weird.
Yep.
It's not pastel, but it's a kind of almost faded out looking. The color on it looks really sharp. I like the art on it. I like everything about it. So yeah, the crypt looks really good. Is that what yours is here, Max?
No, I actually would like a playset of the swords in their showcase frame.
Yeah, those look really good too. I like the swords a lot. I'm probably going to stock them on a few of the filter lands I don't have. The ones from Lorwyn.
Yep.
Or Lorwyn block, I guess. They were spread through Lorwyn. But I never, for a lot of years, those were relatively expensive. They were like $25, $30. And they're like good, but they never felt $25 good. Like there are some cards I may spend $25 on for a deck, but the filter lines never felt good enough to spend that on. So I didn't have a lot of them for a lot of years. And I have a few in decks, but I don't have all of them. So I will probably finish up the couple filters I don't have, as well as probably pick up like one or two of each just to have for future decks I build, because they've fallen all down to like the $3-ish range, it looks like. So I might as well just stock up on a couple of each just to have for future builds, because this kind of stuff then tends to drift back up. If we don't see a reprint for 5 years or something, those will turn into $10 or $12 cards again, possibly. So they definitely won't drop much more than that. So like there's no real downside to grabbing a couple and holding on to them for future brews. I like the crypt, but I really don't need one, because I don't even really have one crypt deck anyway, and I'm not going to start running it in all my decks, but it's a good-looking card. There's the showcase frame, which is kind of the borderless thing with the different art of Council's Judgment, I like a lot, and I'm going to grab one of those. The Toxic Deluge, the Cyclonic Rift, and the Expedition map. All four of those I will probably look to pick up one of the premium showcase borderless ones with the new art for different decks. So those are the four I'm kind of eyeballing.
Are you going to go the foil
well.
versions of those, or just
regular?
regular?
I will. I think the foil ones.
Have fun finding those. Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. The Greaves looks good too, but I have the one deck I have foil Greaves in is running the Invention from Kaladesh, which I like a lot, and that doesn't feel like it's worth making the swap. Same with my Wormcoil engine. I have a Kaladesh Wormcoil engine. Doesn't feel worth making the upgrade.
I think the Invention Wormcoil looks way better than the new one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, they printed a couple cards that have inventions that already look good and didn't print anything that has an invocation that I can't stand.
Yep.
And that's what I want to replace, is my couple invocations that are just unreadable. Not yet, but we'll see. They feel like they're throwing a lot of these premium products out there, so I would guess we're going to have plenty of opportunities in the near future to upgrade this kind of stuff. Well, if you out there in listener land want to tell us about any cards you're excited to pick up from Double Masters, how would you do that, Chris?
You can reach us on a multitude of social media platforms. We'll start with the Twitter birds at CMDR Central. Hit us up on there. I know Dana's usually pretty active on there. I look at it every now and then, and I think Max is pretty active as well. You can find us on Facebook by searching CMDR Central, and you can find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDRCentral and check out our reward tiers. And we'd like to say hello and thank you to the new patrons this week: Jason Block, James Barnes, and Ethan Loesch.
Thank you all very much for supporting us. We appreciate it, both the new Patreons and our existing supporters. That means a lot in these tough times, that you're willing to part with a couple of your hard-earned dollars every week to keep the lights on and the show afloat. So thank you very much to everyone. And as a way of giving back a little bit to our supporters, we have a couple of contests going on here, as well as some just general patron giveaways here. You want to share those with us, Max?
So we're giving away 10 bundles of promo cards, which were donated to us by Andrew Nolan to Patreon supporters this month. And we're also giving 2 bundles away on Twitter. So as long as you find that tweet, like it, retweet it, follow us, you'll get entered in to win one of those 2 bundles. And as long as you support us by the end of August or continue to support us, you'll be entered into the Patreon drawing as well. And then as we move closer to the end of the month, for those interested in joining Patreon or still support us, we are getting ready to ship out our Planeswalker cards that we made with art done by local artist Grace Morris and the frame done by Robert Barrett. So we'll be shipping those out at the end of the month, early September, so you have time to get into our Patreon and support us if you can in order to get a copy of one of those cards.
Excellent. I actually had the artwork printed out and put in a frame for all 3 of us, and mine is hanging on the wall behind me. I think you will probably be able to see it in the EDH Recast in the next couple weeks, and if we ever get off our butts and switch to video, you'll be able to see it then too. And I put copies together for both Max and Chris as well, so we all have copies of those at our homes hanging up, featuring ourselves in Planeswalker form. It's super, super cool. All right. Any final news before we jump into the main topic? I guess we had some bans this week in Standard and
that's an understatement.
Yeah. Man, I think Joey Schultz posted a picture on Twitter that was like, here's the cards that were banned from 2009 through 2017, and it's like one card from Standard, and like since then there's been whatever it was, 13 different bannings or something insane like that.
Yeah, I mean,
you play a lot of Standard, Chris. What are your thoughts on like the amount of bannings we've had in that format?
It's getting bad because it's to the point where in order to be competitive, you play the top tier decks, and the best cards, and then everyone's playing that, so then it gets banned, and then you're out all that stuff. So then you're trying to scramble and rebuild and do all that, and it just sucks. The thing I don't like about this ban, and it's been brought up before, is quite a few of those cards that are banned, we're going to get rotate in like 2 months anyways. So,
right.
I don't know. I think they're just trying to shake up the format so they can pull more people into play, because everything's online right now, so it's not really like Paper Magic's firing anyways. So, I mean, that might be a thing.
One point that actually Joey Schultz again made when we were talking about this was Joey said he wonders how much of this is due to that new playtest team they put in a few years back that was supposed to stop mistakes from getting through. So maybe they've stopped the mistakes that weren't intended from getting through, but he wondered if they haven't increased the amount of super powerful cards that get through because they're looking at it from a competitive standpoint in Standard. So something like Teferi isn't a mistake necessarily, that there's like not some hidden interaction there that causes a problem with the format. It's just really, really strong.
Well, any 3-mana planeswalker is really strong.
So like his kind of point was he's wondering how much of that was because these really competitive people are now making some decisions there. Are they pushing through the competitive cards that they want to see versus while also stopping mistakes, but like the competitive cards they're pushing through are causing way more problems than any mistake ever caused.
That very well could be.
Yeah, I mean, that makes as much sense as anything does. I would also, I have a feeling that as Hasbro's gotten more involved at a corporate level, they want to make money, and I feel like they've probably like requested that the knobs get turned up just a little bit too. I have no insider knowledge, but like that also kind of makes sense.
I mean, we could just go back to the old days, like the first 10 sets ever made and go back to that kind of power level.
No.
What a great segue, Chris. So, we can jump into this main topic here. Cards from Magic's early days. There's obviously some crazy broken stuff that sees a lot of play or is outright just banned in a lot of cases. But like Mana Drain's a crazy strong card and sees a ton of play in Commander especially. But those kind of mid-tier cards are the ones that tend to get forgotten. There's a lot less of them out there, for one thing, so you don't see them on store shelves, you don't see them in binders, you don't see them in games then as a result of that. So I think people just don't realize some of these cards even exist in the first place. And even if they kind of know they exist, they maybe never see them in a store that prompts them to buy it and give it a try. So I think some of these cards tend to get forgotten, and we wanted to talk about some of the very playable but forgotten cards from Magic's first 10 expansions.
Well, see, this is something that I can say about this from working in a game store, is there a lot of times that people come up and they're like, well, what are good cards for this? And you're like, well, there's all this good stuff. And it's like, why don't you go to like a Gatherer or Scryfall or something and look it up? And they're like, there's a website that does that. And you're like, yeah. And then you direct them there, and then you just blow people's minds at how many cards are actually in the game of Magic.
In the you can drill down so far on Scryfall too when you're doing a search to specify exactly what you're looking for to just find all kinds of like just perfect combinations for your deck.
Yep.
But sometimes the wording isn't quite right too, and you can miss a card, particularly if you don't know about it. Like when you're flipping through the newest spoilers or something, the card's there, it jumps out, you're like, oh, that would actually work really well in this deck. No one's like, for the most part, reading through a list of Arabian Nights cards and trying to find something that might happen to be a good fit for whatever brew they're playing at home is. Although that's not a bad idea. Like if there are probably worse things one could do with your time than spend 15 minutes or something now and then just like looking through what all cards were in Stronghold or something. You'd be surprised how many things actually do pop out at you.
It would be a lot better than cruising Facebook and hating life.
That's very
honest with you.
Very, very true. You were 100% correct. So the sets we're looking at here for this little experiment: Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, The Dark, Fallen Empires, Homelands, Ice Age, Alliances, Mirage, and Visions. These are all sets that were in print back when Johnny Carson was still on The Tonight Show.
So when I first read your notes, it was like the first 10 sets, and I look, I'm like, well, like the first 4 sets are all like revised and all this stuff. I'm like,
Right,
am I really supposed to look through all of these because they're all the same cards, aren't they?
Exactly. And you know, Arabian Nights and Antiquities are relatively small sets too, Antiquities especially.
Yep.
There's not a lot of stuff there, but the Legends and Ice Age were huge, so there's a lot to dig through there as well. I will go first with the first one I want to mention here. I'll start with Arena of the Ancients. It's an artifact from Legends for 3 mana. Legendary creatures don't untap during their controller's untap steps, and when Arena of the Ancients enters the battlefield, tap all legendary creatures. This would probably be an expensive card, except for it did get a reprint in Chronicles, which was printed just into the ground.
Yep.
So you can pick up copies of Arena of the Ancient really cheap. It's like $1. I ran it years ago. I ran a Mariki Rebarrett deck. Mariki doesn't untap. She taps to steal a creature, and then she herself doesn't untap. So my thought process with Arena of the Ancients was, it's not going to really hurt me because I had no other legendary creatures in the deck. My commander already doesn't untap. I can tap on other people's stuff. If I steal their commander with Mariki, it actually untaps it. So I kind of work around the downside there. And it did work quite well in that deck. But beyond just something that narrow, there is a whole lot of commanders out there that just don't ever attack.
Yep.
If you're playing one of those commanders, its whole purpose is to do, maybe something combo-y, or it's, Reki very rarely ever attacks. Edric's by Master of Trest very rarely ever attacks. Talrand doesn't attack very often in my Talrand deck.
I think you're lying to me right now because I've died to Reki combat damage and Edric combat damage before.
I think you have died to both. You're not wrong. I think you have died to both of them over the years, but not very often.
No.
And there are decks where if you lock someone's commander down so it can't attack, they're really in trouble. Max's Brago deck is hurting if Brago is tapped down. Your Alesha deck, Chris, really struggles.
Yes.
I have a couple decks that struggle if my commanders are tapped and can't attack. Even Glissa just being unable to block with her is a big deal if she's tapped. And then I went through and checked a bunch of my decks as well for legendary creatures that are just in the 99. I have 4 legendary creatures in my Mina and Den deck, and that's beyond just Mina and Den. So counting the commander, there's 5 legendary creatures in that deck. There's 4 in Sigarda, and then Sigarda makes it 5. Hesperia has 5 in the deck, Hesperia making it 6, and Glissa has 6, with Glissa making it 7. So there's 7 legendary creatures counting my commander in that Glissa deck. And that's not even counting Reki History Kamigawa that has 25 legendary creatures counting Reki.
So out of that, we'll average it at 4.55 or something?
Yeah, like even ignoring Reki, I'm looking at between 4 and 5 legendary creatures in a bunch of my decks.
Which is probably the same in every commander deck. So I mean, it might actually just be worth it to run it in general too, because legendary creatures are extremely powerful. I mean, don't ever get that wrong. There's a reason they're legendary.
Especially if your commander doesn't attack or has vigilance maybe or something and you think you can work around this enough.
Yep.
It's not going to go in every deck, but it's a card that doesn't see very much play. I think it's in 260 decks in EDH and I think there's a lot more decks that could run it, even if it may annoy everyone else around you whose commander gets tapped down and can't untap.
See, this would be an awesome card if we had sideboards or a wish board that I could go for. This would be the type of card that should be in there.
I'm playing against Reki. Well, now that you say that, I'm against wishboards. I don't want you wishboarding Randy Ancients against Reki. That seems like a bad idea.
When were you for wish boards? Like, that's news to me.
That's true. That's true. I never have been, but that definitely makes me against them now. So Arena of the Ancients is my first card. Number 2 will go over to you, Chris. What's your first one?
We're going to start with a card, and this one actually has a few copies. More than like all of these other ones that you guys posted up had, a very, very minimal amount. But this one I really wanted to talk about because I think it deserves way more play than it's actually getting. It's called Soldevi Excavations. It is a land out of alliances. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, sacrifice an untapped island or bury it, which is destroy it for all you newer players. So you tap it, add 1 colorless and 1 blue. So technically when you sack the land, you're not out anything because you're actually gaining a land that creates 2 mana.
Right.
Now, for 1 colorless and tap it, you get to look at the top card of your library, and then you can put it on the bottom. So pretty much you scry 1. Now, this is in 1,000 decks out of 216,000. So, I mean, that's a huge disparity for a land that you really don't lose anything by playing it. I personally play this in, I think maybe it's my Petitioner's deck or something like that. just for the ability to scry. And you, like I said, you don't lose anything by playing it.
Well, and there are some decks that really actually can take extra advantage of having the ability to manipulate the top of your library. Things like Melek is a Paragon, where you're casting off the top.
Yep.
Or Yannat, Cryptic Sovereign, where the card in the top makes a difference. Yannat's in blue. Jaleva, Nephalia's Scourge, cares about cards in the top. So there's plenty of commanders in blue that care about having the ability at the very least to get rid of the card on the top if you need to and try to find something else. And having that attached to a land where it isn't sucking up a slot in your deck is really, really useful too. I've seen this card, and I've read it and never really thought about it. I actually quite like that. It's a really good pick. That card should absolutely be in more decks.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it isn't 1,000 decks, out of 216,000, whereas some of these other cards we're looking at, there's only like 10 or 20 copies in it, out of X amount of decks. But for blue, I definitely think this is a card that's worth people looking at.
Yeah, no, that's a really good call. I am a fan. All right, Max, what's your first card here for us?
My first card is an instant out of Legends called Bloodlust. It's 1 in a red, and it says, if target creature has toughness 5 or greater, it gets +4/-4 until end of turn. Otherwise, it gets +4/-X until end of turn, where X is its toughness -1. This is only in 117 decks on EDH Rec. This is a cool 2-mana pump spell. It's great in Zada, New Kranko, Feather, or even Shu Yun. Those are like the top 4 commanders for it, according to EDH Rec. I've seen it get played in a Kranko Tin Street deck before, where it just made an absurd amount of goblins because of this. It's also something that I've seen people run in like the Naya Enchantment Commander. Ural, the Mythstalker. There we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've seen players use this just as like a finisher, just to get, Ural up even higher if needed.
It also isn't required to be cast on your own creature. So, like, if a block happens or something and one of your opponents have this, big beefy creature and they block someone else's token as part of a swing, it gives you the option to use it as a kill spell. That damage is marked on that creature that it took from that 1/1 token it chump blocked. And then you give it, -4. It's only going to take it down to a 1 toughness, but if it has damage marked on it, that's enough to kill it. Yep. So there's a little bit of flexibility there in terms of using it as a removal spell in some situations as well. I actually have been messing with this card a little bit. I've been trying to figure out how to make a is it combat damage tricks deck using things at instant speed in the combat phase to buff creatures, basically. And this is one of the cards I've had in a couple of different lists I've tried to figure out how to make work. Melek was one of the decks I was trying this with, or Calamax, I guess, could work too if you wanted to add green. But being able to then double this as well, same thing, the creature doesn't go below 1, and if you're doubling it, then it gets, +8/+0, and if you have some other kind of, double strike or something, that gets really, really big, really, really fast. Yeah, that's a good one, Max. It's a card that I don't see play. I don't think I've ever seen anyone cast it, at least not for a few years, but it's actually a really solid card. In an Infect deck as well, that +4 is a big difference in Infect.
Stop giving Infect players ideas, Dana. We're trying to, make it so Infect's not playable in Commander.
All right. My next one here is an older enchantment, Grim Feast. 1 green and a black. At the beginning of your upkeep, Grim Feast does 1 damage to you. However, it also says, whenever a creature is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you gain life equal to its toughness. So whenever a creature dies, you gain life. And yes, you lose 1 during your upkeep, but I guarantee you will gain way more life than you lose.
Yeah. Oh, can you imagine this in your green-black deck? Whatever her name is. I don't even like her anymore. That's why I don't remember her name. Yes.
I used to actually run it in that Glissa deck. That's why it jumped out at me when I was going through. Because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when I used to run this. I think I replaced it with Whip of Erebos.
Okay.
In part because the deck has... Because Glissa recurs artifacts. Yep. So when someone blow up Grim Feast, it's gone. When they blow up with Erebos, I can recast it with Glissa. So in that particular deck, Whip of Erebos kind of made more sense as my way to gain life. But, most decks don't have that recursion, and Whip of Erebos does rely on combat damage. This just gains you life when stuff dies. And there's a lot of decks out there where people are intentionally sacrificing their own creatures and bringing stuff back. This just passively, without you having to do anything, can gain you a ton of life. And if you're in some kind of a deck running, Dictative Erebos or Grave Pact kind of effects where you're intentionally clearing the board of people's creatures all the time, this would be amazing.
If this was just thinking about last week, we discussed board wipes. And on that show, we talked about how our shop owner runs a, 25 board white deck or whatever with planeswalkers. And something like that, this would be wonderful. And because all you're doing is blowing up creatures repeatedly, and you're just like, oh, now I gain this life. So then you don't have to blow up a creatures every turn because you're just like, oh, I can take some damage now because I've already gained a whole bunch of life.
Exactly. Yeah, if this was black-white instead of black-green, it would be in my Athreos deck for sure, my Pestilence deck, because I kill so many creatures. The amount of life I would gain, it would be one more thing that would offset Pestilence damage, but so many creatures die similarly to running a bunch of board wipes in that deck that, yeah, I would for sure run it in there. So there's a bunch of different decks I think that could really take advantage of this, and it's in 185 decks. I think it probably should see way more play.
That's actually a really, really good card. It's too bad I don't play that color combination.
It has a really cool, it's got really sweet art too. It's basically like a guy that's sitting next to like a mausoleum and he's like just gnawing on some random dude's arm. Super, super gross, but it's really, really cool.
Nom.
All right, back to you, Chris. What is our fifth card?
I'm going to talk about a green enchantment. This one is from Alliances as well. Ooh, I really like this set. I found some good cards in this one. This card, there is 63 out of 200,000 decks, according to EDHREC, that this card's run in.
Wow.
It is called Tornado. It is a 5-mana green enchantment, 4 colorless and a green. Has a cumulative upkeep of 1 green. Now for 2 colorless and a green, pay 3 life for each velocity counter on Tornado. Destroy target permanent. And then you put a velocity counter on Tornado. It also says that you can only use this ability once each turn, and effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. Now, I know recently we've gotten quite a few new green, like destroy cards and stuff like that. But this is like the original straight up, and this destroys any permanent. I mean, you can destroy a land in green. You can destroy creatures in green. I mean, anything at the cost of 3 life. Now, while green doesn't have a whole lot of life gain per se in it, you pair this up with white or something, and you just go ham. Just, gain life and just start blowing stuff up. Exactly. There we go. So it was just something that popped out at me that was like, okay, this is a static enchantment that's always there that you don't actually have to use. While it does have cumulative upkeep, but just being able to destroy any permanent in a monocolor is huge.
And it's only three life for each counter on it. So you probably don't want to use it too many times. But yeah, that could be saving. I wish it didn't cost 4 and a green. If it was like 2 and a green or something to cast, the 4 and a green is really rough.
But see, that's also in green where you have all those mana doublers.
True.
And all that stuff. So like usually mana's not a big thing for this because even green decks have the mana dorks, whereas the other colors don't have that. So that kind of, the higher mana cost, when I look at green is kind of like, but then I kind of look at it like, okay, let's just take 2 mana off of it. So it's technically 2 in a green because you usually have mana doubler, dorks, or something else going on.
Right. Yeah. That mana cost definitely is easier to hit in green than it is in other colors.
Yes.
I do like that you don't take the damage the first time. Like you pay the life, then destroy the thing. So you could easily get 2, maybe 3 activations out of this before 12 life is too much this time. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And, I wouldn't run Solemnity just to deal with this, but if you are in a deck with green and white, like Chris mentioned, to gain life, and you have Solemnity out that keeps it from getting the counters on it, then it's just spend the mana to destroy a permanent.
Yep.
I mean, and you pair that with Nyx Bloom Ancient, and then you're just ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a real specific deck that wants it, but I think absolutely there's some cool uses for it for sure.
Yeah, I just found it weird that it was only, such a slim amount of people are actually running it when it seems like it could be something. And, I've never played the card, so I could be completely wrong on that, but just reading the card and how it sits as is, it seems like it could be really good.
Worst case, you could just make someone be like, I don't want to read that. Okay. Too much stuff. What is it? Zach Taylor from Commander Social always says, if there's that many lines of text on it, I'm going to counter it.
Yep.
Oh, that's actually
I don't care what it says. There's too many lines of text. I'm countering it.
That is pretty good.
All right, Max, what do you got for us here?
Well, I'm going to stick in the Alliances block as well with a green enchantment to copy Chris. And mine is Nature's Wrath. It's 4 green for an enchantment, and at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it unless you pay green. And it says, whenever a player puts an island or a blue permanent onto the battlefield, that player sacrifices an island or a blue permanent. And then whenever a player puts a swamp or a black permanent onto the battlefield, that player sacrifices a swamp or a black permanent. And obviously your dual lands like Underground Sea and Watery Grave all count for 2.
Yeah, your shock lands do Your Triomes do.
Scumbag.
That's rough.
This is like that soil card. What is that one that you used to play, Max, where it was
Compost.
black and compost, that's what it is, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird color hate stuff in some of those old sets for sure. Yeah, you don't see much. This is brutal. Actually, this is the kind of card when I talk about not wanting sideboards. I think I'd be afraid you'd see way too many of this kind of card otherwise that are like, could very easily be tweaked just to totally bone some deck. Because like the downside of this kind of card right now is you run the risk of playing it and not seeing those colors and then having it not do very much.
Yep.
Sideboard, you can just solve that problem by sideboarding it out or sideboarding it in, depending on the deck.
And that's why
definitely
I say it just has to be wish boards. No side. You can't sideboard cards. It is strictly, you can only go for those cards if you wish for them.
Well, one deck I've tinkered around with a few times virtually trying to figure out how to make it work was one with these kind of effects and then run a bunch of like magical hack or sleight of mind kind of effects that let you change the text in the card or change the colors in the card.
That would be pretty cool.
And you can run this kind of thing, or like things like karma and like, oh, everyone's playing red this game. I'm going to hack my karma to say mountains or something. And this would be one absolutely you could do the same thing with. It would be brutal if you could tweak that. But even so, I think in a certain meta, and that is 2 colors, odds are one person at least is playing those colors, and it's not unlikely that you'll probably pretty frequently just see every single player playing at least one of those colors.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think blue and black are the 2 most played colors I've ever seen played.
Right.
It looks like it would help against at least half of the top 20 commanders on EDH Rec.
Yeah.
And I don't think I said this, but this is in where'd my page go? There we go. It's in 89 decks.
Wow. Yeah, that's brutal. All right. Don't play it against me, Max, but other than that, go ahead and run it.
Bela's pretty much all colorless. You're fine.
Right. That's true. Yeah. All right. My next pick here is from Ice Age. So not Alliances, the set before Alliances. It's an artifact, 3 mana, Sunstone. And has a 2 mana activated ability. It's not a tap ability, so you can use it on any turn you want. Sacrifice a snow-covered land to have all creatures deal no combat damage this turn.
Ooh, that's not
it's
bad.
In 312 decks in EDH Rec. And I think the place you would want to run this is in a monocolor deck. There's a lot of monocolor decks that run snow-covered lands. You have to have snow-covered lands to make it work, and you probably have to have a density of them out to be able to use. I don't think you want this card in a deck that only has 3 snow lands or something. But like if you're playing in a monocolor deck and you're playing snow lands for whatever reason, including extraplanar lens, is a very common trick. This gives you a fog effect for 2 mana in colors that don't have access to fog effects very often.
No, isn't that... So, not talking about the casting cost of the card, but the activation itself, plus the ability, isn't that just more efficient than Constant Mists?
Yeah, basically. I mean, Constant Mist is a surprise the first time, and you have to counter it, whereas like someone could then remove Sunstone. So Constant Mist is great. But yes, like mana-wise, just spending 2 to cast every single time would be cheaper than Constant Mist, for sure, yeah.
Interesting.
Dana, you run 15 snowlands in Athreos.
I do, and I've thought about putting it in there. I had it in one version of the deck, and I took it out, and I depending on how, like, the deck's relatively new, I have enough defense conditions in there, I think, but it's one that I may cycle back in depending on if I feel I need more protection. The problem with it in some decks, too, is I think in a 3-player game, if you're backed into a corner, if everyone attacks you, you can't really afford to use it. Number one, it's going to be 6 mana, and 3 lands is a lot versus just using it one time. So I don't think you want it to be your only defense, but I think there's a lot of mono decks where it is pretty decent for sure. And there's also a red version called Glacial Crevices. That's an enchantment also from Ice Age, and it's obviously available to run in the less decks, but Glacial Crevices is the same cost as 2 in a red, and you sacrifice a snow-covered mountain and have no creatures deal combat damage this turn. So you basically only want to run it in a mono-red deck, or I guess maybe a 2-color deck that has a ton of snow mountains, but there's no activated cost there, so it's not even going to cost you 2 mana. You can just sacrifice a snow mountain and fog. And in red, that's not an effect you almost ever see, and red isn't exactly known for its ability to defend itself either. So I kind of treated, because they're very similar cards, and I'm going to mention them both, but I think they are both cards that should see more play. They're in, Crevices is in 212 decks, and Sunstone is in, I think, 300 something. I feel like there's definite roles for both of them out there in certain decks for sure. So let's pass it back to Chris. Is it another Alliances card, Chris?
No, I was actually trying to figure out what set it's from. I was like looking at it. I'm like, what is this? Is this Fallen Empires? Is this Legends? What is? It's the one with the fist. That's what we're gonna call it. 'Cause I'm going through a brain fart moment right now.
Don't Google that.
So anyways, this is another land that I'm going to talk about. It's called Hammerheim. It is a legendary land. And
From Legends.
Like I said,
from Legends.
It is from Legends, yep.
Yep, that's what I thought it was Legends. So now this land is tap, add a red mana to your mana pool. Or you can tap it and remove all land walking ability from target creature until end of turn. The way I look at this card, seeing how it's only played in 277 decks out of 197,000, is it is another land that just creates red mana. Doesn't come into play tapped, doesn't do anything like that, but having the upside to any other ability on it is big, even if it doesn't ever actually come into play, but it's always there in your pocket type of deal. So and that's when I was looking for cards that have multiple versatility, and this is one of them in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not much downside to this land short of somebody in your meta playing Blood Moon effects a lot.
Yes.
But it doesn't come into play tapped, does tap for a red. You know, you don't see that much land walking, but like if you are someone who plays with a friend who has a Sheila Dread for a commander with Swamp Walk and you're playing a Rakdos deck, I would for sure put this in that Rakdos deck. Or if you know, that kind of thing, if you are seeing those kind of abilities frequently enough. Or if you have a friend who has like a Rexiel the Risen Deep deck that has Island Walk and Swamp Walk, and you're playing something with red, that's with either, you know, Izzet or Rakdos again, shut that Rexiel right off.
Yeah, the one that popped in my head is like when you're playing against zombies or something, and they play an Urborg and something that says, you know, all zombies have Swamp Walk, and you're just like, well, we're going to stop one of these guys from hitting me, I guess. But...
Right. The black version of this is Urborg, not Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. It's just called Urborg.
Yep.
The taps for black, it removes Swamp Walk alone, but it also removes First Strike. And First Strike, taking First Strike off a creature is pretty relevant in a lot of matchups as well. My Glissa deck would be way worse if Glissa didn't have First Strike.
Oh, I would love to take it away from her one day. Just be like, surprise, no First Strike. What's up now?
No, yeah, seriously. Urborg's pretty solid too. I'm surprised that doesn't see more play as well. So yeah, that's a very good pick, Chris. I like it. Max, we're gonna pop back to you. What do you have for us here?
This is my last one. We're going to go to Homelands for this one, boys. This card is in 32 decks on EDH Rec.
I didn't even look at Homelands. I saw that Homelands was there, and I was like, nope. Ain't happening.
This is the card called Headstone. It's an instant for 1 in a black. You exile target card from a graveyard, and then you draw a card at the beginning of the next upkeep. Instant speed, single target removal out of a graveyard has come in handy for me in the past, and it's not something where the opponent gets to choose something like, you know, with Relica Progenitus or a very specific type like with Deathrite Shaman. This is just, nope, I don't want you to return that, you know, the land for you to sacrifice, or I don't want you to bring back that Wormcoil Engine or that Cyclonic Rift. You just exile it, and then you replace the card. So this is super functional in my opinion.
Yeah, being able to replace itself is really, really nice on this kind of effect for sure. Well, I don't know if I've ever seen this card at all.
I don't think I have neither. I mean, it's definitely a decent card to play, especially if you're playing, like your meta's heavy on people doing Graveyard Recursion, which, in my opinion, if you can fit Graveyard Recursion in your deck, you should have it. But I mean, something like this is just, it's perfect to be like, just, no, go home. You don't get to do that today. I found a new card. What's up?
It's from Homelands.
No playing in the... Well, I actually got saved last week on the EDH Rec cast. Matt Morgan was going to do some infinite combo, and I can't remember what it was. And I happened to have 3 mana. Like, I wasn't expecting him to do anything, but I had 3 mana available because I was going to end a turn, use Kaya's Guile to make everyone sacrifice a creature, and then just hit the graveyards. And he went to combo, and I'm like, oh, I might as well just do it now. And I emptied his graveyard out to save me. Yeah, hitting stuff in graveyards at instant speed when you're about to get just wrecked is a big deal.
Yes.
That's an interesting one, Max. I like it.
Thank you.
We'll jump back to me for number 10, and I think Chris has a bonus number 11 pick after me.
Woohoo!
So my last one here, number 10, is Arboria from Legends. This one is a little more expensive as well. It's like a $12 card, I think. But it's not on the reserve list, so it could technically get reprinted. Part of the reason probably it's why it's only $12 being from Legends and not like, you know, $25.
Yep.
It's a double green for an Enchant World. Not just an enchantment, but an Enchant World card. And for those that don't recall the rulings on Enchant World, only one Enchant World can be in play at a time. So when you play an Enchant World, it destroys any other Enchant Worlds in play, which is not a thing I've ever seen happen. But I guess technically that could occur. So, hey, someone plays a Concordant Crossroads and you want to get rid of it, I guess you can use Arboria to blow up their Concordant Crossroads.
Yep.
The meaningful text on Arboria is creatures can't attack a player unless that player cast a spell or put a non-token permanent onto the battlefield during their last turn. So you are unattackable if you don't put something into play aside from tokens. I don't think every deck wants to run this, but I think there's lots of decks that do things primarily at instant speed. You can blink stuff with your Rune of the Hidden Realms at any point in time, and there's situations where you can just choose to not do that on your turn and do the rune stuff on someone else's turn and become unblockable. Or Reese the Redeemed, his ability to make tokens can be done at instant speed whenever, but this also doesn't affect tokens. So if on your turn you just want to make a bunch of tokens with Reese, that's fine. If you don't do anything else, you just can't be attacked. And it isn't even like a propaganda effect where somebody can find a way to pay the mana to get through. They just can't attack you if you choose to not put something into play besides tokens. I don't think this, like a lot of these cards, this isn't going to be the kind of thing that you want to jam into every deck, but I guarantee there's decks out there where Arboria would be a really, really good defensive card, like a Ghostly Prisoner or Propaganda, that do see a ton of play, and people probably don't even know it's a thing that exists. So it's kind of a weird effect for green, especially, and it's an old card, and it's an enchant world. There's just a bunch of reasons why people don't know about it, and I think it could see more play than it does for sure.
It's actually not a bad card at all. I mean, even if you do play something so that turn now you can be attacked, but then there are turns where you can just take the turn off and not do anything, It might actually help your gameplay so you stop overextending or stop casting too much in one turn to just be like, hey, well, this will save me so I can sit back and refill my hand or, take a break. I need to go grab a soda from up here, so guess what? I'll just pass my turn. You guys can't do anything to me anyways.
Yep. I'm going to board wipe, so unless someone plays a haste creature, odds are I'm not going to get attacked anyway. Yep. So might as well play my stuff this turn. And then next turn when it comes back to me when everyone's rebuilt, okay, I'm going to leave Arboria up and I'm not going to do anything for a turn or two to let the board shake out and let your opponents beat each other up. You can just chill, make your tokens, do whatever you want to do.
I really like that card. It's actually got quite a few purposes in my head.
It's neat, and I think it's just one that people have forgotten about because there's some really expensive enchantments from those early days. There's like the Abyss from Legends. There's a couple other ones there.
Like Chains of Mephistopheles. I probably butchered the name.
There you go. Yeah. In the Eye of Chaos is one. So there's some really neat, weird enchantments from Legends that got really pricey, and this just is not one, but I think it's a cool card that has some uses. That's number 10 here, but our bonus number 11, what do you have, Chris?
This card is absolute trash. It is horrible, but I love this card at the same time because I've actually played this card in decks before. It's called Aladdin's Lamp. It is in 57 decks out of 410,000 decks on EDHREC. And the reason that it's so many decks, according to EDHREC, that it could be in is because it is an artifact. So it could go in any deck. So 10 colorless mana. Wow, so much mana. What are you going to do with all that mana? Well, this artifact has the ability to tap X and tap it. And instead of drawing a card from the top of your library, draw X cards, but choose only one to put into your hand. Then shuffle the leftover cards and put them on the bottom of your library. X cannot be 0. Now, the way I looked at this card is you have a card called Scroll Rack. Does very similar, not quite as, deep that you can dig, but it costs a lot less. But it's an expensive card monetary value. I think it's like a $60 card or something. Whereas this card's only like a quarter. The other thing about this card is this is one of those cards that you can cheat in those evil red artifact decks. Or any deck that's making lots of mana. Like if, we'll go with the red artifact deck, for instance, with Duretti. So this is in your graveyard. Oh, I sack this mana rock here, and I bring out Aladdin's Lamp and just wah-ha-ha-ha-ha.
The one thing I think when I see Aladdin's Lamp is that would feel good to animate.
That was the next thing I was coming to. Was like, and now we're going to turn it into a 10-10 with Karn. Yep. What's up?
Yeah, it's the first thing I was like, well, that'd be really cool to animate and blast at somebody with a 10-10 lamp.
Yep, and like I said, it's not a great card by any means, but it's definitely something that you can think about in certain key decks because it does serve a purpose. Its ability is really powerful, whereas its casting cost is so high that a lot of people, that's probably why they don't play it. But the ability to, let's say you put 5 mana into it and look at the top 5 cards, and you don't lose the other cards. You just shuffle them and put them on the bottom of your library.
It's a pretty great flex, too, to drop Aladdin's Lamp on somebody and have it actually, do work. That's a pretty sweet achievement unlocked moment to actually have just wrecked somebody with that card too.
Like I said, it's a trash card, but I still like it because I've tried it numerous times in decks, and I just can't quite get it to work the way I want it to, but I will find the perfect deck for it.
Well, I think this was during the period when you were on the show, Chris. I had put serrated arrows in my Glissa deck for a couple weeks.
Oh boy.
And it wasn't like good, but it was every single time I would cast somebody's like, are you actually running serrated arrows? It was worth it every time just for the dumb reaction. All right, those are our 10, technically 11 cards from the first 10 sets of Magic's early days. It's really worth digging through some of these old ones. There's definitely some gold in there that people just don't know about because they just have never seen the cards and it hasn't popped up. So it's absolutely worth your time to dig back. There's some seriously cool stuff. That will wrap up episode 216. Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it. I'm Dana. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMBRCentral_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him online at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod. Licensed via Creative Commons. We will be back next week with another show. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.